Hey everybody, good morning on a Saturday morning. Not really awake yet. Um, I have had 2 cups of coffee, but still. So the game ended about 10 minutes ago between Jan and Ding. It was a very interesting game. And one of the players played almost perfectly. Probably one move would have been better than what he did. The other player made about 3 or 4 mistakes, and most of them were small mistakes. And basically, in an equal position, he went downhill relatively quickly. So forth. Okay, so let's have a look. Jan is white, Ding is black. They played another Ruy Lopez or Spanish. And in the first game of the match, this is game 5. In this position, Jan played bishop takes, knight on c6. And he obtained a likely winning position in the middle game / end game, and then did not win. And when I did a preview of the match a few days ago, I noted that Jan had played d3 against Ding and beat him a few years ago, and he did it again. So far, each game has seen a completely different opening than the previous games. We haven't had some kind of 12, 15, 20 move repetition of a previous game with a later novelty. We see players just playing something else every game on move 5 or 6. Thanks, Mr. O. Okay, so b5. Now, the point of d3, which I actually explained last week in the preview video of the match, is white's defending his e4 pawn. So at this moment, we're threatening to take the knight and take the pawn on e5. Whereas if he had done that before, this pawn would be attacked also. So b5, d6. And we have, like a very slow Ruy Lopez where white's not playing for very much, h3. And so it's, sort of very positional, strategical, but nobody can really claim any kind of advantage. It's going to be a long game. Okay, so they played in Ruy Lopez style. And this seems common nowadays, but in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, it was very unusual to see bishop g5, bishop f6, and a Ruy Lopez. But now they're doing it to control the d5 square, because the knight's obviously controlling d5. And white is going to play in Ruy Lopez style, knight bd2, rook e1, knight f1, typical Ruy Lopez maneuver for 70 years. Then the knight can either go to e3 with ideas of these squares or just go to g3. And this knight can go to h4. And that's like white's plan, is white's going to slowly but surely punish black for weakening the white squares. And as we see in a lot of Sicilians, where black plays c5 on move 1, and then maybe later e5 and some kind of Najdorf, white typically plays bishop here and takes and tries to punish on the white squares. Okay, so h6, and he does trade. He trades again, knight bd2. And white is saying, I'm going to play my maneuver, and control these squares, and your bishop's no good on f6. So my bishop's great. My knights eventually are going to be great. Make white's position great again, and black's bishop just sucks. That's the point. Okay, so black puts his knight back on c6, just like when Jan had his knight on a5 last game, and he moved it 50,000 times. Bishop d5, rook takes rook, queen d7 defends the bishop and defends the knight, and allows the rook to move. Rook e1 with the idea that I was talking about with the knight. Rook a8, Okay, and this is the first key position of the game. And the next couple of moves from Ding are not the best. They don't lose, but they give white a nice advantage, I think. So we have to decide whether we're going to try to trade bishops or not with white, with black, I should say. Trade these bishops by moving the knight somewhere and leaving ourselves saddled with this bishop, which is behind all of its pawns. And I think black wants to trade a lot and make the game a draw because its pawn structure is pretty symmetrical and nobody's doing very much at the moment. White eventually is going to start attacking by putting his knights here on these squares. And if black trades all the pieces off, then white's not going to do that. And black has the open A file. So it's relatively equal. If two supercomputers are playing, it's going to be a draw 90% of the time. And here, Ding played an accurate way of trading pieces. What he should do is play knight to d8 and trade the bishops. And the idea is we're going to take with the queen, is if he takes. And the idea is to play knight e6 because black's knight's really good on e6. It stops d4 forever. The knight has control of f4 and g5. The knight's just good on e6, etc. Another way to play is to play knight b8, take with the queen, and then play knight to d7 because the knight's okay on d7. Okay, what black did was actually remaneuver his bishop to a square where it's usually good. But I think in this instance, because black has no pieces next to his king, probably it's good to leave this here. But he played his bishop to b6, so the bishop would be on this nice diagonal, which was nice. It worked out okay. But the problem is the bishop's not on this diagonal. So we have knight h4 to f5 and queen here, and the knight's coming in, and there's nothing near the black king. So this is a risky idea because your black king is just naked. Okay, so he played bishop d8. That's his first inaccuracy of the game, I would say. And then he played knight e7, which is okay. That was the reason he played bishop d8, was he didn't want his bishop stuck here in a passive role, and he wanted his bishop here and play c4 and have a nice active bishop. Okay, they traded, and knight e3. So the game looks pretty equal to the naked eye, but again, this bishop's not very good, and our knights and queen are coming in on the white squares, which this bishop can't stop. Okay, so he played bishop b6, so he played his idea, and white played h4, and the idea is to play h5, and then we cement the fact that we can put our knights on f5 because you can never play g6. And h4, h5 is a really nice positional idea. Okay, he played queen c6. He wants to play c4 and open up his bishop, so his queen defends c4. That's why he did it. h5, c4. Everybody's doing what they want to do. And he played d4. Now, the tactical justification for d4, and I finally learned how to get to the analysis board instead of doing the idiotic stuff that I was doing the previous 4 games. Sorry. Changing the color of the board and stuff. Queen takes e4 is the tactical idea, because we just hung our e-pawn, is we have knight takes c4, and white is completely winning. Black's center is falling apart. White got his pawn back immediately, and he's just going to take everything in the center and be up a pawn with a winning position. So you can't take on e4. So he played d4 because it's a nice center, and we're blocking the bishop from this nice open diagonal. And we're keeping the queen side closed, where black's going to get his counterplay. Black's pieces are mainly on the queen side. Okay, so he took on d4, and he wants him to take with the pawn. Then he can play b4 at some point, and he's got counterplay on the queen side. So white took with the knight. White's knights are getting to these important squares. The queen can come to these important squares. The queen is attacked. These pawns are weak. So white's better. Again, queen takes e4 is bad because of knight takes. Okay. I stay on the analysis board because I'm old and forgetful. Okay, he played queen c5, which is fine. And this is the only move of the game where Jan didn't play like what I would call the best move. The engine might not call it the best move, but who are you going to trust? Me or like the strongest engine that ever existed? So in this position, again, white wants to get his queen into the game, and he chose the wrong square, which lessens his advantage quite a bit. What he should play is queen f3. And there's several reasons for this. One is it defends f2. So when my knights start having fun, you can't play queen takes f2 check, which isn't the case if I play queen g4. The other reason is the queen is on this rook. So white wants to play e5 next move, attacking the rook and busting open the center. And then this rook is going to be very active. So after queen f3, white has a big advantage. The engine that I'm using says plus 0.8, that's a lot, 0.8. And he didn't do that. He played queen to g4. And now we're not threatening e5 because there's no queen on the diagonal, and f2 is not defended in case these knights start getting frisky. Okay. Now Giri and Naroditsky, who I was watching doing live analysis about 2 hours into the game, because the first 2 hours I was asleep, they said perhaps Jan didn't realize, since this looks like a nice battery, that he would get rid of his battery. And he did with the move queen e5. This is an excellent defensive move, because now we can't play knight d5 because when I take, your e-pawn's pinned. I'm threatening to just take this and be up a pawn. And my queen is good over here defending my king side. So this is a nice move. Okay, so he played knight f3, and this gives all of white's advantage away. Black played queen e6, and now the game is just equal. White has no advantage. Now, when I say white has no advantage, that means if two engines were playing, this game would be a draw 95% of the time because white has no advantage. So maybe white would win 3% of the time and black would win 2% of the time, 95% draw. However, grandmasters would still prefer to be white here because these pawns are weak and my knights, control lots of squares. And this knight's a little bit passive. But there's almost no advantage here for white. Basically for 2 more moves. And Ding makes a mistake. So he plays knight f5. And in this position, we can take, or we can play queen f6. Giri and Naroditsky, without using an engine, thought queen f6, like white has nothing. Like black has no worries. Okay, and the engine agrees after queen f6, the position's equal. However, after Ding's move, it's also equal. It's his follow-up in conjunction with his move that loses the game for him. He played knight takes f5, which I think is a serious misunderstanding of what's going on based on his next move. It wasn't like he's playing one move at a time. Ding doesn't play knight takes f5, and then after e takes f5 says, okay, now I'm going to think for 10 minutes and find a good move. He knew what he was going to do. And what he was going to do was bad, very bad. And I'm more critical than Naroditsky and Giri were, because it's positionally quite bad to give away all the white squares to white when white can't access those white squares. He just gave it to him. And knight takes f5 is not a bad move. It's his next move that's bad, but he was going to play that move when he played knight takes f5, so his idea is bad. Okay, so after this, he must play queen d7, which he did not do. And after queen d7, we're defending this weak pawn. We're defending this weak pawn. We're defending f7. We're pinning the pawn. You can't play f6 because the queen takes queen. And we can play d5. So if queen e4, then d5. And we could play rook e8 and challenge the e-file. So after queen d7, if two engines are playing, the game is going to be a draw. It's just equal. There's no advantage to white. And instead he played queen f6, which optically looks okay. Like, okay, but the queen's bad on f6. It can't move. You can't go here, can't go here, can't go here, can't go here, can't go here. You can't move. And you're giving away the white squares. You're giving them away. And the reason you gave them away was you allowed white to play e takes f5. If the pawn was here, I don't know how white's going to get in here. Now I do. He just gets in there. So queen f6, knight f5, queen f6, and as one idea is really bad. Very bad idea. Queen e4. Now white has a monster advantage again. The queen's coming in, and my knight can go to e4. I can play g4, g5. I have the e-file. And if your queen was on d7 here, which he should have played, he could just play d5. And then his position's fine. At least fine. Then it's a 3-result game. So this is a very poor move by Ding after Jan let him out by playing queen g4. And those were the two hiccups of the game. Queen f3 was better than queen g4, and queen d7 was better than queen f6. Now, Jan played immaculate chess, and in a dead lost position, Ding made it very difficult. Ding defended really well considering he was in time trouble. And I believe if two engines are playing, white's most of the time winning here. I don't think black can defend here. Okay, he saved his rook, and his idea when he played knight takes f5 and queen f6, black's idea, was to play rook b8, bishop c5, and chill. Maybe turn on Netflix, I don't know. And the idea is bishop defends the d pawn, the weak pawn, and the rook defends this pawn, and black's going to play b4, and black's fine. That was Ding's idea when he played knight takes f5 and queen f6, with rook b8, bishop c5, no problem. Okay. Jan played rook e2. The idea is it defends the f2 pawn, so there's no counterplay there. And more importantly, it defends the pawn on b2. So if you play b4 now, with the idea that if you take this pawn is hanging and this pawn is hanging, I could just take on b4 because my rook defends b2. Also, it's a good idea strategically to put everything on white squares when your opponent has a dark squared bishop. But defending this pawn, which is potentially weak, and defending this pawn, which is potentially weak, the rook's just better on e2 than e1. It's just a good strategical move. Okay, bishop c5, which was his point. Now, if it was black's move, he would play b4. Again, if queen takes c4, the f5 pawn's hanging, the h5 pawn's hanging. So Jan played the move g4, and now the pawn is defended. This is like 50% attacking and 50% defending. And it's also 50%, I want to play king g2. It's 150%. Because after king g2, we're off of this diagonal, and our king's moving up in the endgame. Then trading queens has good chances to win, because eventually my king's going to win. So I want my king on g2. I don't want it on the back row. I don't want it on this diagonal. I want to defend my knight. I want to defend my g-pawn. So g4 allows king g2, which is good. It defends the f-pawn, which is good. And hopefully, which came to fruition, white will play g5 later and attack the black king. Okay, he played queen d8, which is the engine move. He wants to play d5. Queen d5. And in this position, black has no counterplay. If you said, what should black's next 5 or 10 moves be? What's his plan? I got nothing. There's no plan. We can't do anything. Okay, so you can see that black had no plan because his next 5 moves did nothing. But he didn't lose on time, so that was good. He played king f8. That way you're not pinned. And hopefully you can play queen d7, queen b7, and trade queens. Notice, if you played queen d7, queen b7 now, I could play rook e8 check. You can't take my rook because your queen's hanging. However, also if you play queen d7, I could try to play knight e5. There's a lot of tricks going on. g5. There's a lot going on here. Here's a funny variation if you like funny variations. I'm not saying you do, but if you do. Queen d7, g5, that's my move. Okay, the engine says it's okay, but I'm trying to give a point here. Now I can check. Okay, if that's too complicated for you, I'll check, and then g6. And then you can decide yourself which mate is prettier. Okay, obviously this is. Okay, so that's just one sample variation that I made up. All right, so he played king f8. Now, if I play queen here, that's fine. I kick the queen off of d5, or I trade queens. The queen's nice on the diagonal, b4's coming, d5's coming, etc. Okay, and Jan played really nicely here. He played king f1. The point of king f1 is you can't take on g4 with check. And what I mean is if you play queen c8 or queen d7 to play queen b7, well, let's play this. Now I can play the move f6. The engine says this wins immediately. So I guess I'll play queen c8 so that doesn't happen. Okay, queen c8. Now we can play f6. And the idea is if queen takes g4, it's not check. That's why white played king f1. And now white plays rook e7. And which is funny because you're threatening queen f7 mate. The reason it's funny is there's no defense. Say what? The bishop on c5 is as impotent as a Nevada boxing commissioner. It just doesn't do anything for defense. This is why when black's bishop was on f6 15 moves ago, and he did that, that was a little risky. Because he's letting, white play on the king's side and his bishop's not defending. Okay. So instead of queen c8 or queen d7, which both lose, black did nothing. Played rook c8 doing nothing. White played the excellent rook e4 with the idea of playing g5 and rook g4 crashing through. Black played rook b8 and then g5. Now it says question mark, but that's actually wrong. g5 is the best move. This engine isn't strong enough or have enough depth to appreciate g5. Now in this position, black blundered. Black has to play queen d7, and he's still losing, but he's less losing. And instead he played hg, which loses immediately, to a very nice tactical trick. And Jan, seeing king f1 and rook e4, just shows what a genius he is, because he saw all these tricks pretty quickly too. Rook g4. Now, never play f6. It's very applicable in this position. f6 is the only move that makes any sense. Otherwise, I take on g5 and I win. I just crash through on the king's side. There's no defense. Black has nothing defending the king's side. But the problem with f6, which you should never play, is white has the amazing move knight h4, threatening knight g6 check. Knight g6 check is annoying. The better you are at chess, the more annoying you realize that is. And if you take it, the obvious move, now I play h6, putting it in h. And it's forced mate. There's no move here. The best move, according to the engine, is g5 and then fg. God damn. Okay, this is the game God versus Damn. Okay. And we're threatening to take this and queen. And if you take, I have mate in 2. And I have other mates also that are mate in 3, 4, 5. Okay. So you can't play f6 because knight h4 wins. So he played rook a8. And his idea was after knight takes threatening mate, rook check, and queen, I'm sorry. And then if king g2, which is the best move, let me do analysis, sorry. Queen a8. That's why he played rook a8. Now, queen f7 mate looks good, but it's not legal because your queen's pinned. This is winning for white. White has to trade queens, play the move f6. And now if you take, I play knight h7 check. I play rook e4 check. I play knight f6, and then my pawn just comes in. And I can win by playing either this, or I can play this and queen my pawn. They both win immediately. And this pawn can't be stopped. So the game would have ended pretty quickly if he had played king g2, because that would have happened. Instead, he played king e2, which also wins. Equally as good. Queen e7 check, knight e4. And this was time control. This was move 41, knight e4. So now Ding thought forever. And white is threatening rook takes g7. The engine move, to show you how bad black's position is to give up a bishop. This is how the engine plays black. Frankly, ridiculous. But okay, he sees other things are worse. So he played queen e8. That way you can't play rook takes and f6 check because queen's not on e7. King f3, unpinning the knight. Now we're going to win with f6 or h6. Other moves win. Queen a8, trading queens. f6. Now, if you take, which he didn't do, he played a better move. The knight takes, threatening rook g8 check, winning the rook, and threatening this. So king e7 is forced. Now we have two ways to win. Knight d5 check and knight g8 check. Knight g8 check simpler, and then I queen. Just a queen. So instead of g takes f6, losing in that fashion, play g6. And then he got counterplay with rook a2. And this position, Jan thought for one of his longest thinks of the game, maybe 5 minutes, not too long. And he played king g4. He wants to move his king up in the endgame. And he also wants to get a mating net with knight g5, but doesn't want to allow rook takes f2 check. So he gets his king out of the way. Rook takes b2, rook h6. Okay, now, if it's white's turn to move, if white can play knight g5, threatening rook h8 mate. White can also play king here, king here, king here, threatening rook h8 mate. And the engine actually announces mate here. It says it's mate in 20 no matter what we do, and it like runs its king away and lets me queen. I mean, a human can't do that because that's ridiculous. So in this position, Ding resigned. Very beautiful game from Jan, whose only actual mistake was playing queen g4 instead of queen f3 early in the middle game. It was a small mistake. And then I think queen f6 is the losing move. If you play queen d7, should be a draw with correct play. So a very interesting game. After 5 games, we have 3 decisive, which is really good. And Jan's king f1 and rook e4 are just super world-class moves. Really nice. And really interesting match. Lots of decisive games. The drawn games are interesting. And this was in typical Jan style because Jan was an hour ahead on the clock when the game ended. That's how Jan does it. And Ding has white tomorrow, and maybe he'll equalize the score. He'll definitely try to. And we're seeing more decisive games than draws, which is extremely rare in the last 15 years in World Championship matches. And the games are really good, interesting, and they're really fun to watch. The live analysis with Naroditsky and Geary and occasionally Howell is really good also. So really good match. And I'm glad it's not a draw fest, that there's really interesting chess going on. And this was like Jan in top form. Both games that Jan won this match, he played amazingly well. I mean, amazing. And the game that Ding won, he also played incredibly well. And the draw that they had, not the first game, like the third game or fourth game, the third game, that was very well played also. So really good match, ups and downs, never sure who's going to win, and really good game. Okay, well, Ding lost, so he's not up. The score's 3-2 for Jan. All right, hopefully the game tomorrow will be just as interesting. I'll see you guys tonight when I do my sub Saturday. Thanks, Jay Beast, and so forth. Mainly and so forth. And then you guys can subscribe and play me, and it'll be all great or something. All right, who am I rating? Let's see. There's you. There's you. There's you. We will raid you. All right, I'll see you guys tonight. Thanks for watching.